if you were dying from most any illness that's chronic, like alcoholism and drug addiction is, and you were fighting for your life, and I told you, hey, you got to get honest, you got to try and believe in God, and you got to fix some stuff with the people that you were mean to in your past or you've harbored resentments against in your past, and you got to help people, and you got a 60, 70% chance you're going to be totally recovered and better in shape than you ever were before. Would you do it? Of course you would. We are back with the final episode in this series, the Struggle and Strive podcast. This series has been on the 12 steps. We're unpacking them. We're talking about them. Hopefully some of you guys that are watching are going through them. I've been through them a number of times, and today we're going to wrap it up with step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all of our affairs. Well, let's unpack this. What does it mean? What does it look like in practical application? So the first thing they mention is a spiritual awakening. I think it's important to mention that my spiritual awakening didn't happen until I was already practicing step 12. So having not had a spiritual awakening, I did my best to carry this message to alcoholics, and I had a spiritual awakening. That might be the same for you. I don't know. It's a little different for everyone. I sponsored a man many years ago who had a sudden and profound spiritual awakening in the middle of doing his fifth step. For other people, it happens more slowly over time. Mine happened fairly profound, but it was during step 12. It was while I was sponsoring other men. So let's talk about what a spiritual awakening is, looks like, feels like. They're very, very different, depending on the person and their circumstances, but they're all profound and all of them have a lot of similarities. For me, I had been through the 12 steps with a sponsor, and I was sponsoring other men. Now, at the time that I was first endeavoring to sponsor other men and take them through the steps, I was still living in a halfway house. I still made $8 an hour, which was minimum wage back in 2004. I was riding the bus or walking everywhere I went. I didn't have a driver's license. And this is pre-smartphone by like 3.5, 4 years. So I was still... And I didn't have even a regular cell phone. So when I would get a sponsee, I would say, what's a good time of day and what's your number? I'll call you and you can check in with me. And that was how I sponsored men in the beginning. And I found this halfway house that was full of brand new people who didn't know anything about the recovery or the 12 steps that needed to have sponsors. So I grabbed like 3 guys, and now I'm taking these 3 guys through the steps at one time. And I'm working with these guys, and I'm getting them to pray. I got them to pray on their knees. So this was super scary for them. It was also a little bit scary for me. So even though I was used to praying, I was about 6 months sober at the time. So even though I was getting used to praying on my knees, I was a little unnerved about doing it publicly in front of so many people. But I was working step 3 with these dudes, and I say, all right, this is where we make a decision. We're going to work for God. He's going to be the employer. We're going to keep close to him. We're going to perform his work well. He's going to give us everything we need. I'm giving them the whole step 3 talk. They're all in agreement. Yeah, we're ready to do this. I say, okay, so now we're going to pray. And I got on my knees, and they looked at me like I shit my pants or something. They were like, we don't know what you're doing, and we're not doing it. And I looked at them very calmly, and I said, if you guys don't get on your knees and pray with me right now, I'm not going to sign your slip. And all 3 of them, shaking a little bit, got on their knees, and we said the 3rd step prayer together. And I encourage them that everybody's nervous when they start to form this type of relationship, and when they get, when they're new to prayer and they get introduced to it, and that they were not alone, and that I was scared the first time I prayed, et cetera, et cetera. So I outline how to do a 4-step inventory with them, and then I go and I wait for the bus, because I'm walking and taking the bus. And I get on the bus, and I'm riding the bus through Central Phoenix back to my halfway house. And this feeling comes over me. It's hard to describe. The angst and anxiety and frustration and despair and my hatred of other people and my hatred for myself, along with the obsession to drink and use drugs, just evaporated. it just vanished that afternoon on a Sunday, riding the city bus in Phoenix, wearing somebody else's old clothes. I felt okay just being me. Dirt poor, living in the hood, wearing donated clothing. I felt okay. And I hadn't felt okay, like at zero, for a long time. I'd been in such crippling debt, and I mean spiritual debt, financial debt, legal debt. I had all kinds of debt. And for the first time in my adult life, I felt like I was on a level playing field with everybody, with my fellow man. And I called my sponsor at the time and I said, hey man, I'm feeling pretty darn good. I don't feel like drinking. I'm not feeling angry. I'm not feeling sad. I just feel okay. And he's like, you've been working with some new guys? And I said, yeah, I just got 3 of these prison guys to get on their knees with me and do the 3rd step prayer in the courtyard. He started laughing. He said, good. So we might want to find some more guys that are probably not going to stay sober. And I said, yes, sir. And I directly went out and started looking for more men to sponsor. And I got much more involved in service work. And I started chairing meetings. And I got involved. Not that I wasn't involved. I was going to lots of meetings and doing this stuff. I was doing it mechanically. I was doing it because I was supposed to. I was doing it because I was being told if I didn't, I wouldn't have a place to live. I was doing it to check these boxes off. And that day marks a very distinct turning point in my spiritual journey where I fell in love with spirituality. I fell in love with pursuing God. I fell in love with this new life. I thought, man, this is really working. I had been doing this for 6 months with the very sincere hope that this might actually work. And yet here I am. And I'm like, dude, this is working. This is crazy. I guess I didn't realize, when you're in a loud place for so long that you just become numb to the roar. And then you get real peace, real stillness and quiet. It was overwhelming how much different I felt. It felt like a brand new beginning, like a brand new lease on my life. And the more, as the weeks started to add up in this new existence, I started to really see I had an old life and I was now living in this new life. In this new life, this pink cloud, as some people call it, I have been in for 20 years. That day I had a spiritual awakening. The awakening wasn't just this weird thing where like, oh, I see the world differently. Like I see the world differently now. I feel whole and at one with God. I feel like I'm God's prodigal son and I have come home and I've been welcomed into the family business. How cool is that? It's not like, oh, they let me back. Like I was welcomed into this new kingdom, into this new way of living with open arms and given something to do right when I got here. And I did it. And in doing so, my eyes changed and I started to see the God in everyone and the God around in everything. And while that may just be my experience, I'm here to tell you, I'm not the only person who's had an experience like this. If you have a big book, if you're reading the study guide and you're looking at the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, written in 1935, the first 103 pages contain the basic text of the 12 steps. After that, you get Dr. Bob's story, which is a good one. He's one of the co-founders. Then you get, to wives and the family afterward and to employers. And after that, the rest of the book, the next several hundred pages, like another 400 pages, are literally story after story after story of the first many people who found this way of life through this 12-step process. And if you are in a 12-step program, you could, even if you're not, you could go to a 12-step meeting anywhere in your city or in your town. You could find one and you're going to hear stories like mine. It's not just my anecdotal story or experience. This is what happens to a lot of people, to millions of people. They find long-term, many permanent recovery just this way. Now, I know a lot of people like to talk shit about AA and say, oh, the recovery rates are 6% or less. And I got to tell you, when I was newly sober, they used to say that all the time. I used to sit in meetings where they would say, there's 100 of you here, less than 6 of you are still going to make it here and, still going to be here in a year. And I used to think to myself, well, that won't be me. I'm not very good at things, right? But that's not true. That was old data, and they've actually done additional studies. There's a Cochrane report from 2020 that shows AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, without treatment, has a 22 to 36 or 37% success rate. That's just joining a 12-step program of having permanent long-term sobriety. Now, I've got other studies I could show you where people that have 12-step indoctrination, let's say 27 weeks, like if you pull studies out of that conglomerate, I can show you data where people that are engaged in 12-step activity for 27 weeks out of their first 52, and they measure it for 16 years post, 16 years of abstinence-based sobriety, we're seeing 60%, 65% of them are still abstinent 16 years later. That is an enormous number, an enormous number. If you were dying from any illness that's chronic, like alcoholism and drug addiction is, and you were fighting for your life, and I told you, hey, you got to get honest, you got to try and believe in God, and you got to fix some stuff with the people that you were mean to in your past or you've harbored resentments against in your past, and you got to help people, and you got a 60, 70% chance you're going to be totally recovered and better in shape than you ever were before. Would you do it? Of course you would. Okay, now what about this second piece? Carrying the message. Carrying the message can seem really scary if you're new, especially if your life depends on it, especially if you're like in a treatment center or a halfway house or a sober living and you're like, dude, I got to sponsor people. I'm on step 12. I don't know how to do it. That's how I felt. I didn't know how to do it. I've already shared with you, I was riding the bus using payphones, going to the other halfway house. So you can do it you don't have to have money to do this. You don't have to have resources. You just have to try to do it. The beauty of helping people that are struggling with drugs and alcohol typically is that they're in such bad shape, there's nothing you can do that's going to hurt them anyway, particularly if you're going into this with the intention of trying to help them. And all you're trying to help them with is through the 12 steps. You're not trying to fix their job situation or their marriage or their housing situation or help them get a car or help them move or any of that stuff. You're just there to help them through the same 12 steps. So carrying the message doesn't have to be super complicated. If you share enough of your personal story so that they understand that you've suffered and struggled the same way that they have, then they can connect with you and they can look at you and say, all right, I identify the same way. He calls himself an alcoholic. Maybe I am. And you can build a bridge of trust there. Once that's established, use the book, use the steps, go through the steps the same way you go through them with your sponsor. And it's not up to you whether that person stays sober or not. It's not up to you whether that person follows through and does all the work like you have or I have. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. Many don't, not because it doesn't work. Spiritual fitness, just like physical fitness, it's because they didn't do the work. Gyms work just fine. Ask any bodybuilder, ask anybody who's in great shape. Gyms work just fine. It's how do I translate how effective it is to the next person? That becomes my goal when I'm carrying the message. Like, hey, this happened to me. I was where you are, and I'm now in a much better position. I have healthier relationships. My wife wants me around. She's not trying to take my kids from me. I'm excelling in my career. I'm getting in good shape again. I fixed my credit, blah, whatever. At the pinnacle of all these things is I don't want to drink anymore. I haven't wanted to drink or do drugs or harm myself or anybody else in a lot of years. And that is nothing short of miraculous. That is the message that we're carrying to the next person who's sick and suffering. This next person who wanders into a meeting hall, or who, I got to tell you, I meet people on the street. I meet people in the darndest of places, and we strike up a conversation, and I'd start talking about how I found God through the 12 steps, and they want to know more. And we start talking about it. It's part of the reason I'm making these videos, this particular series in the podcast, because a lot of people ask me about this stuff. Not only do I sponsor lots of men, I have men that come to me with 2, 3, 5 years of sobriety that say, hey man, I'm in a rut. Can you help me? And of course I say, yes, I do the best I can to try and help anyone I come in contact with. And this is one of the areas that you can help. You have an experience, as ugly as some of it has probably been. You have something that can help the new person in a way that most people can't. Alcoholism doesn't represent 80% of the population. It represents about 15 to 20. So only 1.5 to 2 people out of 10 know what this guy's going through, and you're one of those people. So you can talk to this guy with confidence, like, hey man, I used to be where you're at. I'm in a much healthier place today. Do you want to talk about it? Have you read this book before? Can I take you to a meeting? Do you want us to get together, sit on the curb out in front of your sober living and talk about life? Those are all ways to carry the message, to be of service so you can keep this thing going. If you think about how incredible it is that the 12 steps, as we know them today, have been passed down through the same literature with very little modification over 85 years. I mean, it's bonkers. A couple of guys in Akron, Ohio came up with this. They were in the Oxford group. They came up with actually a 6-step program, which later became 12 steps. They put it into a book and they just started mailing copies to people. And they had meetings. People just got together and talked about it. They talked about their experience with it. They're doing what I'm doing right now. I'm just telling you my experience I had with reading that book and doing the stuff that it suggests. I had a sponsor suggest that to take the suggestions in the book, and it's not super sophisticated. It's a very simple process, and millions of people globally have found long-term recovery as a result of doing this. It's not by accident. It's because people like you are going to pick up a book like this, have an experience like I had, and then carry it to the next person. It would die otherwise. If it didn't work, I wouldn't be doing this. Nobody would. Brad Pitt wouldn't be quoted in the New York Times a couple of years ago for having his life change, in his 50s by joining a 12-step group if it hadn't happened. It happens every day to people just like you. So that being said, let's move on to practicing the principles. This is pretty self-explanatory, so I won't spend too much time on it. They say practice the principles in all of our affairs. What does that mean? It means I keep being honest. I keep trying to help out. I think service and being a servant and having a servant's heart is probably one of the strongest way I can keep the connection going. I can keep this relationship with God going the way that it is today. I believe God's grace is free, and I've experienced it so many times unwittingly. I wonder how many people would even make it far enough to get to their first 12-step meeting or make it to a treatment center if they hadn't had God's grace along the way, picking them up and carrying them through some of those times. But when I conceded that, yes, there is a God and I'm going to try to have a relationship with this thing, and then I went through this 12 steps, I developed a relationship with God. And now why would I not practice these principles in everything I'm doing? There's a prayer. It was a prayer taught by Jesus to his disciples, and we refer to it as the Lord's Prayer. And we say, thy will be done. He's talking to the Father, the King of the universe. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. I don't know or even care if you believe in heaven, but just listen to the words. If there were such a place called heaven, and the God of the universe does rule and reign there, hypothetically, even if you don't believe, which is fine. Am I doing that? Am I doing a version of that here on earth? And you don't have to search outside of yourself for the answer. Ask yourself. You have a conscience. We're born hardwired. We're hardwired with a native system that tells us the difference between right and wrong. I believe it's our taproot directly to God at the center of everything. Ask yourself, am I doing God's will on earth as it probably is in heaven? I don't know that I am, but I am trying. I really am. And not because I'm under the threat of something. I certainly don't want to go back to where I was, but I don't feel like anybody's hanging that over my head. I've been sober a long time. I've got a stable career. I've got a stable income. I've got investments. I've got a stable marriage, wonderful children that love me. I'm a part of my community. I don't feel the fires of hell, licking at my heels anymore. I feel compelled to do this stuff. I feel drawn to do it. People feel drawn to me. People ask me about this stuff all the time, and I feel compelled to answer them, and I feel compelled to try and help whenever and wherever I can when somebody is hungry to learn more about this, because it's changed my life so incredibly. And I believe in my heart that it can change your life too. So that's been a lot. If you don't have the study guide and you want to read more on this or look more of the details, not only should you go to struggleandstrive.co and download the free study guide, also get yourself a big book. Get yourself one of the AA big books. You can get them on Amazon. They're probably 10 or 12 bucks. If you're like a Cody Sanchez follower and you're like, screw Amazon, I'm going to shop with small businesses, go to your local bookstore. It's one of the most popular books that's ever been printed ever in human history, you can definitely get yourself a copy. Get yourself the downloadable study guide, get yourself a copy of the book, check out some meetings, of course, to whatever fellowship you would associate with. I want to say before I let you go that it has been an absolute honor spending this time with you, trying to introduce you to these 12 steps that have changed my life. It's been a privilege, and I feel nothing but gratitude that my life has not only been saved, but that hopefully in the future, your life and the lives of all the people you touch can be impacted tremendously. It is my genuine desire that you not only get a book and take the study guide, but really make this part of your life. I hope you have an experience with it, and I hope that you take it and extend the same gratitude and love and new life that you find with everyone you meet, and you go off and have a great life as a result of working these 12 steps. That's it for this series. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you the next time in our next series.